And we are live. Hey everyone, I am so pleased today to welcome Henrietta with me. So if you don't know me yet, I'm Kevin Morrow, aka Mr. Mingle. So I'm a social catalyst and I love helping my fellow misfits uncover their tribe by embracing their uniqueness. But today is not about me. Today is all about Henrietta, and I can't wait to let you discover or rediscover her. And just before we start, and before I introduce you and kind of put some light on what I felt very interesting in your bio, would you like to say a few words, Henrietta?
Yes, so first of all, Kevin, thank you so much for having me on this show. I really love this show, and you know that I've known you before you started this, and we discussed this. I always loved the idea of this, and I kind of thought that it would likely become quite popular. So I'm very, very pleased to see that people are interested. I think it's very interesting. So it's an honor for me to be one of the guests.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I was so pleased when you accepted my invitation. So guys, if you don't know Henrietta, wow, she's something else. Like Henrietta, your brain is very fascinating. Like apparently every person that connected with you was impressed. Beyond impressed by your cognitive abilities, your brilliance, and your intelligence. And so, just in a nutshell, so you're you're a neuroscientist, and oh, sorry. So, once again, a neuroscientist and innovative nerd, you identify as a cosmopolitan free spirit. You've been living abroad for very long in Europe, UK, US, Asia, all around the world. So you have 20 plus years of international experience in biomedical research and entrepreneurship, and the last decade in neuro and behavioral science. And you use neurobiology and a systems approach to investigate addiction disorders and other health conditions. Am I correct so far?
Yeah.
So that's a lot. That's very impressive. And very recently, last year, you founded Objective Recovery. So it's your startup, your baby of sorts, and it's where you leverage neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and biomarkers to help sufferers and treatment professionals find successful solutions to addictions. And we will get more in depth into that because I love your project. I love your startup. Objective Recovery, I believe, is so powerful. Addiction, everybody, in my opinion, has to deal with some sort of addiction. Most people might not realize, but we all deal with addiction in one way or another. Not just the big, classical drugs. There are so many different addictions. So I would love for you to explain a little more. But before we get there, I know you have identified in yourself several what you call unconventional features, and you had some unconventional experiences growing up. And I would love to know, and I would love you to share with our audience today, what have been these features and how did these differences help you evolve in the wonderful and brilliant being you are today?
Yeah, thank you so much for the really nice and generous introduction, Kevin, again. So yes, well, let's get into that. So it's basically you got it really correctly right in the beginning. So first of all, I would like to mention that because I think it's interesting that I don't I never really identify myself as a misfit. I never thought about myself in that way. And so unconventional, very much so. But that's also not something that I came up with for myself when I was very young or a child or anything like that. It was in the first place, it was based on the feedback that the environment gave me. and based on my behavior, my personality, my thinking styles, and so on. And so what you identified very correctly, and so this is also related to what I'm doing now, is that I really try to, because I had, when I was very young, I had so many misunderstandings. So basically people misunderstanding my motives, my behaviors, and so on. And to be honest, some of it was even puzzling for myself. And so that was actually part of the reason why I was so attracted to neuroscience and behavioral psychology and the disciplines like this, because I turned to those because I wanted to understand not only myself, but also similar things, basically, as who we are as human beings and what drives us and what's behind these individual differences and so on. So that was also originally, sorry, my phone. I had to turn it off. So originally I was not even trained in neuroscience. I was trained as a biologist and a molecular biologist, and I worked in different areas of biology. But what I just described, this is what drove me into neuroscience. No more than 13 years ago. Before I was working in different other areas of biology. So getting to the unconventional features. So basically, most of these are related to how I think. So you introduced me in the beginning in that way, and many people recognize it straight away when they meet me, that I tend to have some thought processes and also emotional processes and features that are not necessarily easy to understand or easy to put in a box or to interpret, because it can be quite complex and so deep and complex and quite wide. And so basically this is one thing. This is, I think, it's normal features. It's just basically a cognitive style, emotional style. But a big part of it, another part of it that I figured out via being a neuroscientist myself, is that I definitely have predispositions for different types of mental health issues. And it makes sense. It made sense. I knew this already when I was a child or a young adult, because they run many different types, run in both lineages of my family. I just did not deal with them, address them in the beginning, the first phase of my life. So I really wanted to understand this. So it's basically part of it is like cognitive processes and then these predispositions. So I will give you a few examples for this because I think it's interesting. And many of them, if you just see these or hear, and if you people get to know me, many of these features seem to include seemingly contradictory features or traits or components, which when I got into this, analyzing this and a lot of reflection and also using the science, I figured it's not actually contradictions at all. It's only on the surface. So I give you a few examples. So for example, I have always been very introverted and kind of a loner, and I never needed a really large social environment. But at the same time, I have always been quite assertive and ambitious, everything but shy. So this is one thing that I really like to emphasize, because people still often confuse introversion with shyness. So shyness is basically more related to social anxiety, which I don't have much of. It's more like introversion is more like what type and how much social engagement one needs and what energizes people. But at the same time, I really, really enjoy stimulating and interesting interactions with people who are compatible with me. And so you probably have an idea about this because we interacted a bit. And so I don't really have much limits in that sense. So introversion doesn't kick in. It's just more like makes my social engagements a little bit limited and very, very, very selective. Another one is that I recognized very early on in my life that I had a passion very early on as a child, like age 10-ish, for learning and knowledge and education. In spite of these things were not abundant in my family, in my environment at the time. So it's basically there were not many people around me who were very highly educated and interested in these things. I just turned out to be this way. And so I decided to explore that. And so when I was in school, I was very drawn to scientific subjects, for example, because that really appeals to me, trying to use both intuitive processing and established knowledge and data to understand how everything works, basically, not just the mind and the brain, but how the world works. And so I got into science. I decided actually I already knew kind of that I wanted to be a scientist when I was about 10 years old. And I remember still vividly, we had an assignment at school and the teacher asked everyone that we were like 10 years old and let's discuss next in the next class what you want to become when you grow up. And so when I brought up I wanted to be a molecular biologist because I heard that term and everyone was really shocked at what is it even. And so basically I followed that track. So to this attraction to science. And so to this date, I'm a scientist. And I never regretted that. I still think that's probably the best thing that I could have chosen for myself. But at the same time, I'm not only a scientist, like I have it's related to introversion and being kind of a loner tendencies that I like to do things and figure things out on my own. But at the same time, I'm also a very, very curious person. And I really value life experience. And I always wanted to explore and experience a lot of things in life. And so that could lead and still can lead sometimes to sometimes quite wild explorations that are not traditional. So I also never wanted to live. I know you are interested very much in social life. So I never had an interest in living a traditional social life, having a family, things like that. More like having the personal freedom to explore and to try anything. So it's basically on one side is nerdiness and doing things on my own, and then there's a very widespread explorations that's also related to being around the world, traveling and trying different environments, countries, and so on. Then another thing is that naturally that's related to the thinking style. I tend to have a very a big picture focus and very systems thinking style. So I really love to identify connections between different things and get into very complex questions and problems and so on. But at the same time, I can be extremely goal-oriented and very focused and really even too focused, like single-minded. And this is, I think, a good example for how sometimes these traits, as we develop from childhood to adulthood, can we can develop behaviors and styles that are compensatory. So, for example, I have this big picture focus and very non-linear thinking style. But I realize that if I want to make it in the world and in society and in professional life, I have to focus on something and I have to make that happen. And so that's also sometimes people see as contradictory. Other things similar is that some people see someone who is creative and imaginative, a bit rebellious, eccentric, kind of very often associated with those people like unreliable a bit and not, it's unpredictable. But so I definitely have like to be creative and I have that background, but at the same time I'm also very kind of rational, and I think I also picked this up during my scientific training. That was a huge influence in my life, and I was really drawn to mathematics and linear logic and things like that. So it's basically it's again two different things. And another again is I tend to be a very critical thinker, and I don't just accept or take anything that is given to me as granted. I try to figure out my own truth and the truth behind things using different methods. But at the same time, I consider myself very, very open-minded. And that's also related to curiosity. So it's not really limiting. And then the mental health related features are examples of that. So I'm a very bold dreamer type of person, and I'm not afraid of taking big risks. Actually, I already know from my biological knowledge, that examinations, that I have actually a solid biological predisposition for things like risk-taking, novelty-seeking, things like that, for genetics. But at the same time, because like I'm also prone to anxiety, depression, and mental health issues from inheritance, I believe. That can also show up, and so that can limit sometimes. I've definitely had periods in my life when my motivation was not as normal. My drive was much lower due to those conditions. And so also the last one that I want to mention, that actually my favorite these days, is that uh, I am generally a very independent person, so probably you can have an idea about that. But at the same time, I have unfortunately a predisposition to addictions and obsessions. Not all of that is bad, because obsessiveness can help sometimes, for example, in professional life, to realize your dreams, your goals, and so on. But the addictions that I experience are definitely not good to have. And so it's basically, that's what I wanted to mention in the beginning. So these may sound like, you can tell me, do these sound like contradictions to you, or is it easy to understand?
Love that. There's so much interesting stuff. And before I start to react a little bit, I would love to welcome properly Rudy, Oli, and Danielle, maybe even more. I don't know if you are there, guys, if you don't comment. So feel free to comment if you like that conversation, if you like discovering or rediscovering Henrietta. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And Henrietta, I'm sure would love to answer your question in time. But for now, I would love to react a little bit. I feel fascinating that you mentioned earlier that basically, and you tell me if I interpret it correctly, and basically some of your early challenges, you turned it into your best assets. And basically you became a neuroscientist and behavior specialist because you had some neuro, let's say, quirk or difference or behavioral specificities. And I feel it's absolutely fascinating. There's a trend, I believe, that we tend to be appealed to those fields where we don't feel we are matching, and we don't feel necessarily aligned with a norm, whatever it might mean. And like, for example, in my case, I've been fascinated with sociology early on because I had a lot of social troubles. So now I'm specialized in social life, but one of the reasons why is because I struggled so much with social life before. And I know a lot of psychologists have had a lot of psychological problems, or loved ones having them. Or another one, people appeal to philosophy. Usually they are questioning the world in general, the universe, God, or whatever they call it. And they don't feel they fit, and they're trying to find deeper and bigger answers. And I feel one of the, like, I have two amazing examples for that. One might not resonate too much with you, Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was what some people could call a shrimp. You know, he was very skinny when he was a kid, and it pushed him, and it pulled him to become that hunk of a man, that giant of a man, to overcome that. And another one I'm sure you know very well, and you will absolutely resonate with, is one of my idols, Jim Quick. Jim Quick, that has been called by one of his teachers almost in his face the broken boy, because he had a horrible accident at 5. His brain was injured, and he had massive memory issues. He couldn't learn. Learning for him was almost impossible. So he taught himself how to learn. He found himself for himself another way to learn. And nowadays is one of the most prominent specialists in memory. That is a fantastic win. Like he absolutely turned his very worst weakness into his very best asset and strength. So I love that you mentioned that actually what you're doing best these days, or some of the things you're doing best, actually came from early challenges, let's say, or trials, or ways that you were different and you were challenged about. So it is very, very fascinating. And I loved so much that you mentioned that introversion and shyness are two very different things. And it's funny, a little bit earlier today, I mentioned in a call that the very famous music icon, Barbara Streisand, she was extremely shy in her career. Apparently, she had the unfortunate habit to puke or to feel very sick before going on stage. But actually, she's an extrovert. She's a deeply extrovert. She's not introvert at all. But she was extrovert and shy. You can be both actually. Which for many people it seems like non-logical, but actually so thank you so much for mentioning that. So I see we have some newcomers. So thank you, Danielle, for joining. LinkedIn user, we don't know who you are, but hello to you. So you just mentioned hello, everyone. Unfortunately, we can't know you. We don't know whose face is behind that name, but welcome anyway. And let's move on because I have other questions. I'm excited to ask you, Henrietta. And so we have a quite good amount of connection points. Actually, we discovered we have many things in common. One thing that is not so nice to have, but actually I believe was a very healthy, very powerful fertilizer to both our growth was bullying. So you also had some, and let's be honest, bullying is so very common. I don't feel special because I was bullied. So many people were bullied in their youth or later on. But still, like so many people share that origin story. It doesn't mean it's nothing. It doesn't mean it's something we should brush away. It's a very serious problem. And I would love, and that's something I found very interesting. So we had a different take on that. I have the feeling most people I hear talking about bullying are men. So maybe it's because I'm a man, maybe I'm totally biased, but I hardly hear any women talking about bullying. And you told me you had almost the other way around. So I'm super curious about that. And in any case, I would love for you, if you're okay, of course, to share a little bit about your own experience about bullying and how you grew from it and how it defined you negatively at first, obviously, and then positively, how you've been able to grow from it.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So first of all, the first part, so that the gender distribution, and I think it's what I observed because I'm in mental health. So I very much have, access and I interact with those communities very often. That's where I heard mostly from many women. And as for example, I have been part of communities of people who are in psychotherapy and other mental health treatment. And there is definitely statistically, women tend to be more open to seek out those treatments. So it's, and I think it's related to that, but it's basically, I think it's simply where you look. So the second part of the question is my experience. Of course, I'm very happy to share that because we can always learn from these things. So you mentioned those two examples a while ago that people who had, the differences. And so you said that I might not relate to Arnold's, physical kind of background. So actually, my bullying experience was related to that, because the reason I was bullied when I was a very young child, it all happened before I turned 10 years old. And it all happened because of simply a physical feature, and namely, I was a bit overweight, and you know how kids are, so they always try to recognize the outliers, and they throw the stones on them. And so basically, that's what I was teased about and bullied about, and for many years actually. It started in kindergarten and also in elementary school for a few years. And to your question, so what happened to that? And so actually, the way I reacted to that, as far as I can remember, that it didn't make me shy. That was so interesting. It made me develop very strong armors, emotional armors, and so. But by that I means that I try not to react. And of course, I was not thinking as a neuroscientist, as a 5-year-old or 8-year-old. But somehow, naturally, I figured out that if you react to those challenges, they will do more and more and more. So I decided somehow, without being too aware of it, I wouldn't react much. And so I developed this emotional armors, and that stayed with me, and it's still with me to a certain extent. And that's also, it can be very helpful. It was very helpful when I was a child, because it did not let those environments and those they were basically other kids affect too much my personal development in a way that I would become very withdrawn and shy, and lose my self-esteem and things like that. I would just not react to it, and more than that, because actually sometimes you can some people can react to abuse, bullying, abuse, anything, in a very reactive way, basically do the same thing in return. And so that was unfortunately sometimes also my reaction when I was a bit older, and I resolved my issue, my weight issue. I will get to that in a minute. And then I had a lot of self-confidence, and I would become sometimes a bully myself. I'm of course not proud of that, but that basically happened. And I wouldn't target people who had the same issue that I had, like physical features, but other things. And so luckily it was not very, 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 very severe, but definitely happened. And I think it's, people, when we are hurt, they generally react to it in two ways. Either we become miserable and lose our self-esteem, or we try to make others miserable and lose their self-esteem. So that was kind of my reaction to it. And then another maladaptive reaction to the bullying was, so it was related to my weight. So when in the beginning of puberty, when I was 10 years old, I realized that I started to see that basically weight is something that you can lose. So I decided that I can solve this problem. I can lose the weight. And so to be very brief about that, that turned into a very serious eating disorder that lasted for almost a decade. And there was a progression, different manifestations, different types of eating disorder conditions. And so it's very common. And these days, but unfortunately, back at the time, especially in Eastern Europe, when I was growing up, there was no awareness about that. People didn't know about eating disorders, mental health, so nobody could really help me, including myself. So that was just a reaction, how I reacted to it. So I really had to address that later on seriously to resolve the eating disorder, which luckily I resolved that by my mid-20s, but then I developed others, which shows that the predisposition exists. So it's basically the way I grew from bullying, and to this date, I still have those kind of, I know that you appreciate very much, and you like the idea of vulnerability and being open and honest about our limitations and shortcomings and so on. So I would completely cut those out. and turn into what many people like these days, kind of a very stoic type of person. Many people love to study stoic philosophy because they want to become like that. So I developed into someone like that due to that experience, and so that there are a lot of problems also in my social life and especially in my personal relationships, because it was developed a kind of an avoidant attachment style, and it's basically really limited. So still that, not letting people in, not revealing too much about myself. And then on the flip side, of course, this kind of reaction definitely helped me, especially in my professional life, because, you become tough. You don't react to everything, attacks in a very, with losing your confidence and self-esteem. So that's definitely a positive side effect. But sometimes I can even be a bit too confident, and so that's also not really recognizing my limitations, and that's another issue. I think it's related to also the predisposition to the addictions and obsessions, not recognizing the limits, and where the healthy limits are, and we all have those. And so, but it definitely helps. And so it definitely, I can see now it grew out of that background, that early life background, this kind of self-confidence.
Yeah, thank you so much, Henrietta, for that share. That's a beautiful way. Exactly what you mentioned, that you used to have that armor, but now you're able to show some vulnerability, and you've been able to merge, the two sides. I feel it's very fascinating, and there was I believe I already shared that on this podcast, but I love that analogy so much. I feel you will love it as well. There's a famous French author called Bernard Werber. He wrote a series of books called The Ants, very famous books, even worldwide. And one of his special books, he compared the way we deal with psychology and with the way we deal with physical aggressions and with typical armors and skeletons. And he was comparing the mammal skeleton, the inner skeleton, with the insect skeletons, with the exoskeletons. And it's very fascinating how some people, exactly like you mentioned, the way you did, you created a norm, the equivalent of an exoskeleton for an ant, or an insect. The thing, when you create that, it's extremely sturdy, it's beautiful and shiny, it looks very strong, and many people are really impressed by that. But actually, the thing is, if one blow is able to go through the armor, then everything inside is a pulp. There's no bones, at least for insects. Then if someone is able to go through that armor, then you're done for. Every blow will be absolutely critical and touch vital
So
organs.
actually, I experienced that when in my early 30s, and so I had a relationship, and like a romantic relationship, very close, and so that really I also kind of decided that I wanted to experience like completely like ditching all my boundaries once in life, and that definitely, but that in turn into really extreme. So it's again related to these predispositions to extremes, extreme thinking, extreme behaviors. So that was also was the beginning of the development of my drinking problems. When I had a problem with alcohol, that was my main addiction, and so that was very intimately developed together with that relationship. When I was trying to be like from very like super strong like ironclad boundaries and armors to nothing. And so the other side of it, and of course that's not healthy either, and so that turned into, and of course that was not nourishing for me, because that was also the person I did it with was very similar to me actually, and So we couldn't, there was no really good example. So we were just, it's basically like falling apart together. And that led to that was part of it. That was not the sole cause of the addiction, the drinking problem, of course, but that was a big part of it that led into that. And then I had to resolve that. And so definitely I know how this works. And I'm really trying to be very mindful not to do that. You mentioned that, a stab into someone's really soft core, because that's what I have a tendency to do that, especially still sometimes if someone treats me very unfairly for some reason, and I try to, I recognize, because I'm knowledgeable about psychology and this kind of stuff, so I can understand and recognize what is the sore point, and really pierce through that and step into that. That's not a good thing. So, and it's just a reaction, and it's like a counter reaction. And so I had to go through. I went through this, and I'm still sometimes honestly dealing with this a bit, but I'm really trying to be mindful, not to be.
Yeah, and it's a journey in itself, right? It makes sense, and it makes sense at some point. You needed you at least you felt you needed protection, and so you build yourself a powerful armor. Some people are absolutely unable to do that. That's the thing. Some people don't feel like they have a choice, and some people are just not able to make that choice. And just to finish on that, I don't know if you ever watched that movie called Magnolia. I don't remember the.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that movie. Yeah.
There's that scene to me. It's a really. So I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise. I have to admit. I like him, but not that much. But in this movie, he's absolutely brilliant and displaying that character extremely strong. Exactly as you mentioned, very super manly, very with an iron clad armor. That guy seems unbreakable, seems like the king of the world, empowering other men to step into their masculinity and be very strong, very raw, male-ish guys, alpha men. And you have that interview with a female interviewer, a journalist, and I believe just the one question the one question is giving that hit, hitting his armor at the weak point, at the fatal point, and you see him crumble, and you see the armor shatters into tiny pieces, and you can see him melt. And it's absolutely beautiful acting. If you never watched Magnolia, it's a fascinating movie, and just for that scene with Tom Cruise, it's like wow, and it exemplifies that this type of armor can be very powerful at times. I'm not saying don't ever do that, and actually, I feel it's very important. We are human beings. We function, and you much more than us as you are scientists. You know the power of trial and errors, right? And sometimes, like when I got out of my shyness, when I started to become a dancer, and I was starting to empower myself and set myself free, I became overconfident, and,
Yeah.
and and to be honest, when I look at myself now, I'm judging myself a lot. I feel I acted like an asshole. Like I was very, I was overconfident. I was I was being a ladies' man, abusing of my of no charm, because until 18 I never even kissed a girl, because I felt so broken and underestimated myself, that I wouldn't even dare go close to a woman. So I was kind of overcompensating, and so I became that, I believe, this very bad version of myself. But it was a phase. It was kind of a chrysalid phase to for me to kind of try the other extreme, and so I could find something in the middle that would be strong enough yet kind enough at the same time, and really find my personal balance or synergy. So I feel
Yeah,
it's
I also had that myself, the weight loss when I was like a teenager, like a young teenager. So that weight loss that I did all by myself, that gave me a huge, I didn't have much, I think, a problem with confidence by default, but that gave me a boost I didn't need. and and that turned me into similar things, basically similar behaviors, like being reckless with social life, sexuality, all kinds of relationships, things like that. Basically, is just doing things that were also just not healthy in other ways, and also not respecting others is I would respect their boundaries, but I would just again, it's avoidant kind of style. I would just, when I would get bored with them, and I had this idea that I can just find someone else and just dump them, move on, don't even say a word. And this is something that I still have to pay attention to because it's very ingrained.
and that's the thing. I believe it's a very, very important point that we are just human beings. We're doing our best. We're trying. Some people are not even. Let's be honest. Some people are not even trying. But I believe for most of us, we're trying to become better. We're doing our best, and sometimes we're just failing, and sometimes we're failing for a good amount of time. And what we do is not enough. But it doesn't mean we're failures. We're just work in progress, or as Ajit Nawalka says beautifully, work of art. We're work of art in progress, and brushstroke by brushstroke, we improve ourselves. And sometimes we go too far, and oh, you know what, that brushstroke actually ruined the canvas, at least for a time. But we always can clean up and start fresh, at least on that specific piece of the canvas, and start the work again, as long as we don't give up. And I feel it's extremely important. And you know what, I feel it's a beautiful bridge to start talking a little more about what you're doing these days, because actually when we fail over and over again, or when we get caught to those traumas, and we get destroyed by bad experiences, we easily fall into addiction. We easily fall into ways to fill the void we have inside, whatever kind of void. And I understand, the way you described, your behavior when you had that ironclad armor, and you were very powerfully confident. I have the feeling you were trying to cope, and trying to fill some kind of void. I don't know if you see it that way. Personally, it's exactly what I did. I was trying to make up for all the years I believe I lost, because I felt ugly and I felt weak. And so suddenly I had some power in my hands, and suddenly I was appealing to women. So I was like, yeah, you know what? Let's use this power. I was robbed from it for so long, or at least it's how I felt. So
Yeah.
no, let's use it, and let's even abuse it. So during that time, I have to admit I got addicted to sex in other things, and it's not uncommon. And I've known many other addictions in my life, and that's the thing. Most people, I believe, if not all people, uh, have the possibility to fall into that, and some addictions are absolutely invisible. Like, I believe religion can be an addiction. It doesn't have it's not necessarily an addiction, but it's kind of substance in itself. And some people get heavily addicted in religion or spirituality, or
Yeah.
even like personal development can become easily an addiction as well. And like, it's quite funny, quote unquote funny, that so I'm French, right? And the number one addiction in France is wine. And I believe it's the case in many countries, like alcohol in general. But for many cultures, alcohol is not a drug. Alcohol is so deeply ingrained in the culture. It's not imaginable. It's not possible. People can't fathom alcohol being an addiction. Like cigarette, that's okay. Cannabis or heroin or you name it. Sure, okay, these would be drugs. Alcohol, oh, absolutely not. And yeah, people are just fooling themselves because of tradition, because they don't like that idea. They don't like to be deprived of their wine of a glass of wine or pint of beer or whatever they love to drink. But actually, yeah, alcohol is one of the nastiest addictions and one of the most delicious as well. Let's be honest. I love my wine, but I'm aware of that. I'm aware of its danger. And yeah, I would love for you to explain a little more, and obviously we don't have like 6 hours. I know you could go forever on that topic of addiction, obviously, but I would love for you to explain a little more, about that objective recovery startup of yours and what you do exactly. What is your that beautiful project of yours?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So, yeah, so first of all, the alcohol, just very briefly, that I completely agree. That's actually one of the worst drugs that we can get into. You just get addicted to it because it can turn destructive and in so many ways. There are many other drugs people use that don't have that breadth of negative effects, but I would like to maybe just clarify a bit, because I always have the impression that popular language, it's like conversations, people very easily talk about designate behaviors as an addiction, and even like makes jokes about I'm addicted to my chocolate and or my whatever, even healthy food, or my partner, or anything, basically things that are not really causing any problems. It just means that it's a bit, they really like something, it's normal to like it, because that's how we are wired, the brain and the body as a whole. So basically addictions, the key component of addictions, and the ultimate definition is that those are behaviors or substances or anything, basically behaviors that cause that have negative consequences, and usually quite severe negative consequences. And the addiction is when those negative consequences keep occurring, and people usually recognize already, even not completely in denial, and they still keep doing the behavior. Someone who just loves, wine, for example, they get into studying wines and things like that because it's so interesting, but they never really abuse it, they never really overdrink. That's not an addiction. Something like dancing, if it doesn't have any negative effects on your life, that's not an addiction. Maybe you just do it, it feels like, because you do it every day, and it's a bit too much relative to all the other things. But does it have negative consequences, anything destructive? If the answer is no, but it has to be very important and honest answer, because very often, when we are really addicted, we just don't recognize, it's kind of refuse, repress those realizations, those realities. So basically I ask the question that is it causing a problem or not? And so that's basically what, if it's causing a problem, then that at least has the potential to turn into an addiction. Now the other topic, the other question that you also mentioned before, that we have all these life experiences and traumas and things, experiences that we react to, and sometimes not in the healthiest of ways. We both of us listed a few of those. It's basically related to it doesn't make any sense to blame anyone or even ourselves for those, even though someone who has a healthy conscious like responsible otherwise, it's good to recognize that that's not a good thing to do. But it's not what happens very often is that we are just simply not aware development. Everything, the whole of life is development, and it's improvement in a good case if we try to improve, recognize and fix and improve things. And so those things that we experienced earlier in life, maladaptive behaviors, maybe sometimes we abused others or, took advantage of others. It's not the right thing to do, but it happens because we are just out of awareness. And so this leads to a very important part of you were asking about my interest and what I'm excited about and what we do in objective recovery and to tackle addictions and to try to figure out better solutions to addictions for people. So a lot of that is related to, I studied this for more than 10 years as a neurobiologist in a lab. The mechanisms in the brain and in the whole body system that basically many people have heard at least that more than 90% of the thought processes and decisions that we make in the moment are not even conscious. We just become aware of it. And so this can be sometimes a long process to become aware of those issues and including our own behaviors. So that's also, it's normal that it takes time to grow and to recognize and then to change those behaviors. So this is the key element of what we are trying to do with objective recovery now and tap into, because that does not exist at all, at least not on a satisfactory level in current treatments. So first of all, the problem that we are targeting is we are not developing new treatments or new, drugs or new anything. There are already so many options and treatments and solutions out there. One of the bigger problems, though, is that people, when they are ready, they feel they are ready to address this problem. They just don't even know where to start. And part of the reason they don't know where to start, what treatment would be appropriate for them, is because it's, what we are discussing, it's not, they are not aware of these problems yet. And so with objective recovery, we have developed a product, and it's still under development, which basically helps tap into those unconscious processes. Using, instead of just asking people, okay, tell me what your problem is and, what have you experienced, that's very limited because the answer to those questions can only be conscious. People only say what they are aware of. What we are doing instead is we created an experience for people, just like addiction or recovery is an experience. So this is an online experience, and it's. I know, Kevin, that you are really a big fan of video games, and so basically our product is very much like a video game. We use those developmental principles and that technology and so on, and people can engage in a game-like environment online, and basically instead of being entertainment, they have the opportunity to build their life's narratives and to make different choices and to share their problem in a way that does not require a lot of conscious thinking. And so it basically happens very spontaneously, just like a relapse very often happens in that way. And so we use, my background in neurobiology, and some other people on the team now who have that kind of background use neuroscience concept and psychology concept to analyze that engagement and then take that as data from the person who is doing and use that data to match them with treatment. And the algorithm, the platform, digital platform that we are building is basically creates in the end holistic recovery strategy. It's again not treatment, it's a strategy, and with different options that target different components of the problem and their background, who they are, and their goals included. And they receive this strategy, a plan, and then they can choose to either explore that plan on their own, or we can potentially help connect them with the right person, a provider, treatment professional. And so basically that's a one level, the behavioral level, and we will also start integrating not only this behavioral assessment, but also biological markers, like looking at It's not clear at the moment. I won't get into that, but basically get based on organic samples that can be obtained from the body. I also studied this for more than a decade and use that information to fine-tune the strategy. And then people can explore those. And if it still doesn't work, then they can come back and redo and fine-tune the whole cycle.
Yeah, I love that. It's very fascinating. Like, I love how you turn a topic that is quite heavy, right? Like addiction, it's not a fun topic. Let's be honest. It's something like so many people are struggling with big time, and gamificating that, making it like a game to recover and to get back to health and sanity. That's amazing. I love that idea so much. And yeah, you're right. I feel it's absolutely brilliant to really make it playful, make it, like, yeah, you know what? Let's enjoy getting back to healthy, good life, and get away from addiction. And I really love how you mentioned, I didn't realize that. It makes a lot of sense, but really that an addiction is something you do on a very regular basis that has negative consequences. And so if it's all good, then it's not an addiction. It's just a kind of craving, maybe a big one, but still a tendency, or you could call it many ways. But yeah, it's very fascinating. And as we have to wrap up, unfortunately, I feel we could continue the conversation for hours, but we respect your time, guys, and we respect ours, actually. So we will wrap up in a few minutes. Just before that, I would love to thank Michelle and you that joined us. Really, thank you. I'm so glad that you're enjoying the conversation. And so before we wrap up, I would love if you had a very quick tip. And I know, of course, it wouldn't be enough, but at least a first tip, a first step for someone that is struggling with addiction, and they don't see the end of it. They feel like, whoa, I'm on a slippery slope, and they have no idea how to deal with that. And they might not have the means, to go to a proper doctor, and they might not have the means to buy the drugs. Yeah, it's kind of bad choice of words, but you see what I mean, like the medicine to cure themselves or do a program. Do you have any quick tip that obviously won't fix the problem, but at least that would give them some room to breathe and to kind of cool down the situation? Is there anything like an easy one-step thing that could at least make it more easily to handle? Do you have something like that in your toolbox?
Yeah, I can definitely say something like that. That we have a kind of a encouraging component and something that is a bit more scary, maybe. So basically, my suggestion is because most people who experience addiction usually takes a very long time, way too long time to resolve, and many people just don't ever make out of it. So that's why it's such a big issue. Even for me, with this background, it took me 10 years to resolve it completely. So part of it is because people who have addiction background and predispositions. So predisposition can be very important, whether it comes from, what we were discussing, early life traumas, intergenerational traumas. I also have kind of that background. We didn't get into that component, genetics, and, many other elements. I think it's helpful to recognize that this is not necessarily, many people don't like to see it as a disease for some reason, but it's a predisposition. It's something in life that, just like some people have certain preferences, some people have a predisposition for this. It's not nobody's fault. It's not a moral failing or anything. But at the same time, the scary part is that what I would always suggest is that many people usually recognize after a while that this is not good for them. It's not 100% denial. So it's very important to become realistic and to be a realist, because that was part of my problem. We live in this fantasy world, and just cultivate, keep doing the same things because it's instant gratification. It's fun, kind of, even if it's not, if it's just a compensation, if it just makes us normal. But really think about the reality of this. We can really run out of time, unfortunately, if we don't resolve this problem. Drugs, many of them, they kill people instantly. Opioid overdoses, opioid epidemic is a good example for that. Even alcohol can lead to that, and anything, basically, even if it's just nothing else but engaging in an addictive behavior instead of living a fulfilling life, that's also very detrimental. So be realistic about that. And sometimes, in my experience, people with addiction live in an environment or have friends and family who are, some people like to call them enablers, people who don't really keep, just they don't recognize this is a big problem, and they keep, okay, it's okay, you will get away with it. That's not okay, because we can run out of time. And life, unfortunately, is not limitless, even though in professional life, especially on LinkedIn, people really like to say, just we are just our opportunities are limitless, and the limit is the sky. It's unfortunately not the case, in my opinion, not even in professional life or anywhere. And so with addiction, especially, again, anything that is health related, we can run out of time, and there is such a thing as too late. And it happens so many people. Just look up any statistics online; it shows very poorly and clearly. So do something at least.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And yeah, acknowledging it, it can be extremely painful for many people. But yeah, obviously the very first step, and then at least acknowledging and recognizing that, yeah, you know what, something is not going well. So yeah, thank you for that. It's very simple, but yeah, obviously very powerful. And okay, though that's the end. I would love for you to just say a few words to wrap up, and we will wish everyone a wonderful Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin, again, and thank you for. I actually don't know who was in the audience and how many people, but thank you for coming. And so feel free to, if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and soon we will have a website. Actually, it's just a question of a week or two. It will be objectiverecovery.com, the website where you will be able to see more about this. But at the moment, it's LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out. And thank you again.
Oh yeah, we are eagerly waiting for Objective Recovery website to be on. And thank you again so much, Henrietta, for joining me today. Thank you so much, everyone in the audience, and especially the people that dared to comment. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. So enjoy a wonderful day, and see you next week. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you again, and have a great day and year. Happy New Year to everyone. Bye-bye.